Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our webinar on building intelligent websites with Drupal. This is a pretty exciting project we've been working on for a little over a year now. And so we're going to kind of talk through sort of this new style of website, sort of what I see as the next generation of websites out there. One thing that, over the years as we've built sites for a lot of organizations, and particularly we tend to build a lot of websites for marketing departments, people that are trying to do maybe some more usability type work and some things like that. And so we get a lot of questions about when we're building these websites, what types of things are best practices and the best way to go. And so everything from what types of keywords should we be buying in ad buys to what colors work best on the website, what social media networks work best. And so, a lot of times there's not really great answers to a lot of these types of questions, despite the fact that actually the web is a pretty measurable medium. A lot of times we find there's not some good answers, but there's three main questions that we kind of, three categories of questions we see kind of over and over again, and we wanted to help build a system to get some better answers to these. And one of these is, whenever we make a change to our website, do we have a positive or negative effect? And something I find interesting about this is that one thing that we actually do a lot over here is we have lunch and learns and think and drinks where various different people that are sort of experts in different areas get together, and even among ourselves that spend all this time kind of in this industry, we a lot of times debate over what are best practices. One of my favorite debates that we have for many years has been things like drop-down menus, flat menus, or mega menus. And a lot of times, well, a lot of people are reading articles and so forth. There's not really any data around. There's not a whole lot of data that's out there as far as which way is the best. And so we want some ways of gathering data around whenever we make changes to a website. Are we increasing the value of that website or not? One of the other things I think is really interesting, and this is something that's stuck in my head from years ago, that I was talking with the head of a marketing firm, a fairly large marketing company, and he said, the problem with marketing is that we know that some of the stuff we do works, and it kind of follows the Pareto principle that we know that roughly 20% of what we do produces 80% of the results. The problem is we don't know which 20%. And so it's always kind of stuck in my head of, is there some way that maybe we could understand that better? And then, of course, if you understand what 20% is producing 80% of the results, you do more of that and less of the wasteful things. And of course, you can have a huge impact on the effectiveness of your website. And then, the kind of major elusive thing that we start seeing that a lot more marketing departments and even IT departments are having to answer is, what is our return on investment on this whole web thing? What's interesting is I go to a fair number of sort of meetups and talks about things like social media and so forth, and inevitably, in probably 3/4 of the sessions I go to, someone always brings up, what's the ROI? And what's interesting is, even though the web is so measurable, a lot of people don't have a good idea on what the ROI is. And so, one of the things that I was trying to accomplish is, can we come up with a better answer for, or at least, kind of get a good estimate with some solid logic behind it on what's my return on investment. So what we've developed to help with this problem is what we call an intelligence system, or a website intelligence system. And really, to kind of just explain what it is, it's really just a system that integrates data in to help people make better decisions. As we were creating the system, I was thinking, it's actually kind of odd the way we create websites, is that it's almost a little bit like creating, say, a robot that might be able to do all these cool things and can go out into the world, but we have no feedback mechanisms. So they could be out there just kind of bouncing into walls and we wouldn't necessarily know it. And so it's kind of an interesting, particularly having sort of an engineering background. One of the things you learn is that feedback loops are extremely important in building better systems. And a lot of times we don't create we kind of build our websites around heuristics, just what we think is best, and we don't do a whole lot of things to create these feedback loops that'll help us do things better in the future. So two of the biggest areas that I think intelligence is important on a website is, one, behavior. What are people doing on the website? And two, who are these people? What can we learn about them? And so there's kind of both these sides to intelligence that we'll kind of be seeing as we go through this. So one of the, taking a step back on sort of a bigger picture, a book that I've always kind of found very fascinating is a book called The Fifth Discipline, and it's written by a gentleman who was the director of MIT's Institute for Learning and Memory, and really it was a study of what creates great learning organizations. And his theory, I think it's a very sound one, that in this day where people have access to a lot of the same things, businesses have access to a lot of the same things, that the businesses that are going to succeed, or the organizations that are going to succeed, are those that can learn faster than other organizations. And really the point of a group of people coming together is that you can learn faster and learn more as a group and kind of create this sort of group intelligence, if you will. And so he studied how does that actually happen. So there's 5 traits he found, and the first 4 are somewhat common that you'll find in good organizations that are run well. And so the first one is personal mastery, and it just means that there's people that they're interested in learning. They're reading books, or they're always online learning new things. And actually, we find that in the web world, there's a lot of people that they spend a lot of time understanding their craft. The second is mental models, and really what's important here is that mental models just basically means that there's these things we believe, these things that we believe are best practices. And they're important because they allow us to think efficiently, but at the same time we need to challenge these on a regular basis and have some way of challenging them. And so the next is really kind of a shared vision. So now we're getting into sort of what groups do together is having an idea of what is it that we're trying to work towards, and what are we trying to be more intelligent about, and then the last part is sort of team learning. How do we kind of kick ideas back and forth? And so one of the things that they found in the study that they did is that some of the top organizations in the world are doing these 4 things, but there's a 5th thing that a lot of organizations are missing. In fact, there's actually a really interesting experiment he talks about at the beginning of the book called the beer game. You can kind of look it up online if you're interested about it, but it's sort of this situation that they take all these MIT MBA students through early on, and what they find is that actually about less than 10% of the groups actually, or 90% of the groups fail this game, and it's not because we don't have some of the smartest people in the world going to MIT, but it's because they're missing this 5th element. What the 5th element is systems thinking. And really, it's this idea of not just sort of this tunnel vision of doing what you think is best. It's really more about understanding that every time I make a change, every time I do something, what is the effect? And understanding the larger picture of what's going on and how systems are sort of interconnected. And so that's really a large part of what we wanted to try to accomplish, adding sort of this whole systems thinking idea to websites. So what would that sort of look like? And so when you're studying systems, a lot of times, like you have a website, and in many ways it's kind of a black box. There's people coming to it. There's all kinds of stuff that's been done to it. We don't always really know exactly what's going on. What we can do is study the inputs and the outputs. And so what are some of the inputs on a website? So you've got your creative and your UX. You've got things like what kind of features do you have on a website? Content is a big one nowadays, particularly it's becoming so important in marketing. Things like your traffic sources. And so sometimes you don't necessarily always have control over all these, although a lot of times you do, particularly if you're doing some paid advertising or something like that. But there are ways you can kind of indirectly influence your traffic sources. And then, of course, your visitors yourself really are a important input into the system. And all of these things kind of work together. But then the question is, what are our outputs? So, one of the most important things is something that my uncle told me years ago when I got into business, and he said, and my uncle has a lot of education. Actually, ran a bank up in the Boston area and sold it. Did very well for himself. And the one piece of business advice he gave me, he says, measure what you value, because what you measure goes up. And so the question becomes, what do we want to measure? Well, so there are great systems out there, analytic systems like Google Analytics, that allows us to measure a lot of outputs of a website. So most of the metrics that you see in something like Google Analytics when you just install it out of the box, I call volume metrics, and they're things like how many hits are we getting to a page, how many sessions, how many new visitors, and maybe how many pages per session. And so there's a sort of these volume metrics, and a lot of people actually kind of fixate on these volume metrics because they're simple to measure, but they're actually not really that valuable to understand. Now, Google Analytics, which most people I think are familiar with, actually has a very good system, or a very useful system, for measuring the value of a website. And that's their goal system, but it is something that requires setup. And what we actually kind of find is that while most of the people that we talk with do have Google Analytics on their website, or possibly some other type of alternative out there, not a lot of them actually have their goals set up, because the goals take some work and they take some thought, and there's actually a fair amount of limitations in the way that standard goals work. But then the one thing we also find is that a lot of times a system like Google Analytics, goals are really set up more around when someone converts. So if visitors coming to the website, they might ask a question or request a demo or make a donation, or if you've got a community, maybe join your community. And so these are sort of these conversion events where we kind of now are moving someone from just an anonymous visitor to being a known person. But in this world, we're trying to create engaging websites that we want people to interact with. That create better brand impressions. There's sort of a layer of events that are missing, and I generally kind of refer to these as engagement events. And these are things like who's sharing your content. So if someone's on your blog, who's clicking the buttons or sharing your content on Twitter, let's say, or who's commenting on your posts, who's watching your videos, who's there's all these other things. They're not exactly conversion events, but they're really important to measure so we understand what types of content is driving engagement. And so that's one of the first things that we wanted to do, is we wanted to be able to measure a lot more events. So things like when CTAs are being clicked, people are sharing things in social, commenting, all these types of things. And so the intelligence system, actually originally I think we'd have to build something separate, but what it really ended up looking is that there's actually a lot of infrastructure inside of Google Analytics, but you need your website to push a lot of extra things. They're not just things that activate out of the box. And so that's what we want to do with a system like Drupal, is we're like, no, we can use Drupal's infrastructure to push a lot more events over into Google Analytics. So in normal Google Analytics, out of the box, you wouldn't see anything in the events reports. But with something like intelligence, that allows the ability for us to push a lot of different types of events. And so we needed a system. The great thing about a content management system is it gives us the ability to sort of manage these events and when they occur, and so forth. And then some of the other things that we want to be measuring events are one of my favorite things to do is to measure what we call our conversion workflows. So we put up these things, we call them CTAs. They're sort of like house ads for ebooks, or for some seminar that might be coming up or something like that. And so you have so many impressions that you're showing, but we really want to measure some click-through rates, so we can do some sort of different testing and try different creative on them. And so pushing these events gives us a great way of doing that. We can push every time a CTA is shown, every time it's clicked through. And then if we've got a landing page, like let's say someone wants to, they click through a CTA for an ebook, then we can look at, well, how many times has that landing page been viewed, and how many times has it been submitted, so that way we can play around with the creative and come up with better converting landing pages and calls to actions. So while it's important to measure all the different things that we value, the next thing we need to do is we need to value what we measure, and I'll show you kind of what that means. And the tricky part is that once you kind of Google Analytics has around 200 measures just out of the box. You add in your goals, that might add in 10 to 20 more, and then with all the events that we're pushing with Intel, now you're starting to actually kind of push more up to 240, 250 events, and so it becomes hard to say, well, if this one page over here, say, drives more time on site, or this one over here drives more sticky hits where someone doesn't bounce off the website, which one is better? What ones drive more conversions and all these kinds of things? And so it becomes sometimes difficult. You've got just so many numbers, and in particular in Google Analytics, you have to run around to a bunch of different places to kind of pull them all together, but you've got so many different numbers that what we want to do is normalize it, bring it all back to just a single number, And so it just makes it a lot simpler for people to say, hey, is this piece of content better than this piece of content, or is this traffic source better, this type of advertising or something like that better? Let's bring it back to a single value. And so what basically the mechanism for doing this is we can put scores onto all these different types of volume events, goals, and events, and we bring it back to a single score, a value that we call a score. And so the way, this is kind of a basic setup that out of the box, the intelligence module says, okay, well, for every visitor we have coming to the website, that's worth 0.05. I like to think of that as a nickel. There's other people that say, no, don't relate that to dollars. It just depends on what you're trying to achieve. I like to do it as a good practice for trying to measure ROI. So I try to bring it back to dollars. But a lot of times when we set this up, it could be set up to just be points or just be whatever you need. And so we do something like where if a person comes to the website, that's worth a nickel. A stick just means that they went to at least one other page or they did some sort of valuable event. That's now worth a dime. We brought a person that's a engaged person to our website, and then say every additional page is worth 2 cents. If someone makes a comment, say on the blog, then it's worth $10. If they share in social, it's worth $5. And then we've got our goals. So if someone submits a contact form or maybe requests a demo or does something like that, we can put different values. Even if they call in, we can track phone calls and say, okay, that phone call is worth so much. And so that's a bit of the scoring system. And I'll show you how all this works. We'll do a demo kind of at the end of this, but I want to kind of give an overview of the system. So one of the other challenges that we found with systems like Google Analytics is that a lot of people don't look at them very regularly. And if they do, it's normally just sort of an analyst or maybe a marketing person, but a lot of times the people making decisions are the content writers, are the themers, the developers. And so a lot of times they're not looking at Google Analytics. They're really not familiar with how the website's doing and the changes they're making on the website impacts them. And so we wanted to create as much transparency as we could for these types of people. And we found is that they are logging in regularly into the content management system into Drupal. So let's bring those reports back into Drupal. And so and let's try to do it in lots of ways where it's not just even like you hit the reports tab that's off the side that hardly anyone ever uses. Let's actually integrate it into the administrative interface. So, for example, this is Drupal's standard content admin page. It's probably the most popular page, particularly if you're a content writer on a website. And so normally you wouldn't have this score, entrances, and views. You've just got sort of what kind of content is, who authored, and so forth. Well, intelligence now pulls that data in from Google Analytics and a few other sources, and now can create scores. And so as people say are writing blog posts, they now can get an idea on how is my blog post doing versus somebody else. And so another thing that we want to do is that so when someone is writing a piece of content, we want to make it very easy for them to just click this analytics tab and get a full set of reports about how is that page doing. It's particularly useful on, like, say, blog posts, and where you can look at things like, okay, how much traffic am I getting? Where's it coming from? How many people are sharing this page? How many people are sharing, or how many people are commenting, and these types of things. Another example of kind of integrating it into Drupal is one of the things that I love web form in Drupal, but one thing that I always really want to know is who are people, just a quick glance, where are people submitting this form from? And so just something simple that we did was now that we're kind of tracking everyone that's submitting forms, we can go back into Google Analytics or add this or some other system that gives us real-time or near real-time location information, and we can then we can integrate in their location into our forms. So the other thing, I mentioned this a little earlier, that we found challenging with Google Analytics is that a lot of times there's a lot of great data, but a lot of times it's spread out all over the place, and it's a little hard to say for this asset or for this attribute, what are all the different things that are going on? I want to bring traffic, and I want to bring events, and I want to bring goals. I want to bring that all together into one view. And so that's one of the things we want to do. Since we're going to create some custom reports, why don't we kind of create what we call scorecards which sort of give you this overview of all the different things that are creating the value of a particular asset on a site. And when I'm saying asset, things like, it could be like content, it could be visitors, it could be traffic sources, it could even be segments of content, such as authors or taxonomy terms or things like that. And so this is what kind of like a page scorecard would look like for a blog post. It's showing all the traffic. It's showing things like how many shares are happening on this page, what types of conversions are we creating, all the different types of all the different types of traffic sources. But it's all brought down to just this one. In this case of this scorecard, just this one page. But there's scorecards for lots of different things inside your Drupal website, so we can get a better handle on this particular asset, what's creating all the dynamics of that. And then another thing that I think is really important is significance in segments. So in other words, we want to be able to create attributes in segments. So one of the most important things on a website for modern marketing, particularly inbound marketing or content marketing, is content. And so while the scorecards give us a great way to go in on an individual blog post and say, hey, this blog post did really well, but a lot of times it might be hard to analyze trends. Or say like what topics might be doing the best, and a topic is going to be a grouping of pages, and so we want a way of doing that. So maybe you've got things like authors or content type, possibly even the tone of an article. So you might make a article that's got it's kind of casual in its tone, another one that's more business speak or what have you. What types of tone would resonate with different types of audiences? And so there's all these different ways of assigning attributes and effectively segmenting out content. And so like a good example is Drupal has all kinds of different content types. So that's kind of a no-brainer. Let's push that information out as a page attribute. So that way we can look at how are all our blog posts performing, how are our landing pages and regular pages and web forms, and of course as you build out your website, you could have all kinds of things like events or bio pages and all these different things. And so let's see how they're acting to add value to our website. Another one, and this is actually one of kind of my favorite reports, more because of the dynamic that is created, is that you can look at authors. In Drupal, pieces of content have an author. So in particular, like a lot of times we recommend setting up a blog for an organization and actually having it be multi-author. And so we can actually see what kind of authors are creating the best content by grouping all the different pages that they've created and making sure, of course, we're pushing all the segmentation data over to Google Analytics. Another one is terms. So this is just taxonomies inside of Drupal, and you can take any taxonomy and turn it into page attributes for segmenting data. And a lot of times, we like to have, like, say, a controlled vocabulary and maybe a free tagging vocabulary. But you could create vocabularies around anything, like I talked about before, the tone, or maybe even the type of media that, this was more of a text blog post, and this one had an infographic, this one had videos in it, and things along those lines. And then you can kind of track how those different types of categorizing content, which ones are performing better and producing the most traffic and whatnot. And so, what we're going to need is we need a way to manage a lot of the page attributes. So out of the box, you've got things like we can push the authors, the content types, the intent of a page. That's sort of where it's kind of a custom thing that we like to do. We say things like, say, video posts or blog posts are sort of intent for attracting, where landing pages would have the intent of converting, and you can create your own intents if you want. So you might have one that's sort of like customer service or something like that. And so you could tag pages that way. When was a piece of content published? And all kinds of different things that you can add. You can dynamically add additional page attributes, and that way all the content or just certain segments of content can have those attributes associated with them, and then you can compare the values that are going on between two different types of segments. One of the other biggest areas, that a lot of so far we've kind of talked about mostly is about the behavior, what's going on a website. But one of the things we really want to understand is we want to understand who our visitors are better. And so one of the things that we want to do with intelligence is that we wanted to be able to kind of track individuals better. And so whenever someone first comes to the website, they are given a token. And they're anonymous. We don't know who they are. We don't have an email address, and there's We don't know their first name, last name, anything like that. But we can track them with an anonymous token and see what they do. Now, the minute someone submits a form, we now do have an email address or a name or something like that. So we're kind of looking at this report. We see, oh, there's a lot of anonymous people on the website, but here's my little tester guy, Tommy Tester, and he's now a known person because he's submitted a form. There's other ways that someone could become known. It could be that they click on an email link from an email campaign we had or something like that. So there's a few different ways of doing things like that. Or even, a customer service rep might type their name in, something along those lines. But one of the really neat things that we can do, tracking people, is knowing the time of every event they're doing. We can reconstruct their click stream through the website, and that's basically just saying, that we know for this person these things happened at this time, and we can kind of see how they move through the website. In fact, one of the things I actually love about this is since we've implemented this, we're really understanding a lot better the usability of a lot of the websites that we're doing. In the old days, years ago, we used to actually do a lot of usability work. We'd put together proto-sites, we'd videotape people, their eye movements, hand movements, all those kinds of things, but that was a very expensive process. Nowadays, with sort of the MVP, kind of launch the website, a lean website, but really what you need to be doing is looking at how are people engaging with this website and then improving based on that data. And a lot of times, these types of reports are great, particularly when we get some sort of notification or a client gets a notification that someone's having a problem on the website. Particularly if you're trying to do customer service automation or something like that, and someone says, "Hey, I can't find this on the website." Well, the rep can kind of pull these up and say, "Okay, I see where you're trying to go, and let me help you." And then, of course, hopefully that information gets back to the developers, and the developers can think through, or the information architect can think through, how can we build a better workflow? People are getting confused around, trying to find this piece of data or how to use our search or something like that. And so the other thing that we want to be able to do with visitors is, just like we can put attributes on content, we want to have attributes for visitors. One thing that Drupal has built in is users have roles. Now, this is, of course, only going to be if you're a registered visitor of the site, but we're going to go ahead and push those roles. But then we can do other things, like maybe if you're looking to build leads and sell things to people, like a business, you might want to have a lead score. Or if you're a nonprofit, you might want to have a way of saying, like, who are your biggest engagers or your biggest influencers on the website, and if they go and they hit certain things, hit certain pages, or do certain things, you can increase their score along those lines. Or even try to figure out what are their interests. If people come to a website, and we'll look a little bit more at this, how this works in the demo in here in just a few minutes. And then one of the other really neat things is that the web is really this collection of cloud applications, and a lot of people are putting these applications on their websites. Things like Add This or Discuss, or even the CRM systems, or something like a HubSpot, and these types of systems. And there's little pieces of data all these different systems have. Google Analytics, another great example, is all these little pieces of data that all these systems have. What we really want is a way to bring this data together. And so what we're kind of seeing here is there's data that's coming from a bunch of different places in this. A lot of it's Google Analytics, such as the browser location, the browser environment, but some of it's coming from Drupal itself. So when did people submit a form submission? What data was in that form submission? Things like, if we have an email address, we actually can go out and we hit against a service that will attempt to go and figure out that person's Twitter accounts or social media accounts, maybe even find out how many Twitter followers they have, their clout score. Other systems like HubSpot do some of those things also, and so if you've got a HubSpot subscription, we can go out and we can grab that data from HubSpot, but we wanted a place to bring that all together and to kind of give us a good view, and we also wanted a place that basically this can act as a hub to sync data between these sources. So let's say, for example, in HubSpot normally, or a lot of marketing automation platforms, if you want to specify, if you want to know where someone's from, you have to ask them that in a form question. But the reality is that Google Analytics has that data, based on their IP address and some other things. Actually, Add This does that too, and there's a few other services out there. And so, what we want a system that says, I don't want to necessarily have to ask them what city they're in and give them another field to fill out. If I've already got that information sitting in another system, I want to push that over into HubSpot so that we can do more accurate marketing. So that's another piece of what we wanted to do. So let's take a look at kind of how this stuff works together. And what we're going to look at here is we're going to kind of look at this is a real-time demo. This is actually kind of a fun little tool that we kind of put together for DrupalCon a few months back. It's not the core part of Intel, but it's actually, I think, I actually use it a lot for testing, and it's really kind of good to help you understand sort of real time the things that are going on. So I'm going to go ahead and use it for this demo. And to start with, I did want to just kind of show. So we're sitting here on our Drupal website underneath the configuration, and here we can just sit there and go in and say what kind of values do we want to put around different types of events that are happening on the website. And so a lot of people ask, where do these values come from? So this is where that's all set. So you can just go in, and there's defaults when you first install Intel, but then as you add things, or you can change them up, and you can even change things on a per page basis. But so this is where sort of all the default scoring is. So what that allows us to do is I'm going to go ahead and bring over another browser. So sitting here in Firefox, and this is going to represent a person just browsing through the website. And so right now they're off the website. This is kind of a little landing page. And so let's say, for example, that someone they saw on Twitter, someone tweeted about our branding blog post, or maybe they found it in the search engines, or someone commented on it, linked back to it from another blog. But however they get to the website, they're on an external website, and they go ahead and they click through to the branding post. So what we see then happening in our real-time analytics log, go ahead and move our demo guy off to the side, is that our page came in, and what we see is that the site got a bump of, we've gotten a visitor, a page view, but we got a bump up of 5 cents because we got one hit, and this is a demo site, so there's not live people coming across the website. And then we see down here we've got our anonymous visitor coming through, and again they're at 5 cents. We can see up here that our referral was not set. It was just a referral link, and it's at 5 cents. And I actually associated a keyword with it, kind of using a little tracking system in Google Analytics for branding. And so now branding as a source became, that could be AdWords or something like that. And we could say, okay, well that one's gotten 5 cents. And then we get down to our pages, and I see, oh, the blog post that the person clicked to, and it's not quite 5 cents. That has to do with that we want to balance when a page is an entrance page versus when a page is sort of an assist during a session. So we score pages a little bit differently, but there's still that reflection. So let's say our demo visitor reads this blog post. They kind of get down to the bottom of the page and say, yeah, that was pretty neat. I'm going to go ahead and read this other post, this one about design, about flat design. And of course, this hit comes in into our page. And now what we can do is we can look at the different types of attributes this page is creating. So it's pushing the content types as a blog post. The author is Gretchen. The intent of this content is attraction. One of the category, so it's just a taxonomy. The subject of this page is user experience, and a free tagging term is web design. And so it's creating these page attributes so that now we can start kind of grouping different pages that might have the same author or content type or whatever, and start to understand better what those things are about. And so we see here is both these pages now have gotten a score. Ian's got his blog post got a higher score because it was the entrance page, but we're going to give some credit because Gretchen wrote something that got someone to click to something else. We see here are the subjects, and we're starting to add up the value of the subjects. And then another interesting thing that we're doing here is that we're trying to understand what this visitor might be interested in. And so maybe we could customize content for that visitor. And so if the person's interested in user experience, maybe we talk about, say it's a agency website, we could talk more about services around user experience. Or if they say subscribe to our email list, or something along those lines, well, then we know we can say push that information over into a HubSpot or a MailChimp or something like that. And so then we know that if we're going to have any content that's geared towards user experience, then you know that we can have that tagged, and they'll be tagged in our email marketing plans that way. So there's a bunch of different ways that we can kind of use this information. As I click around, it starts to try to total up what types of pages they're clicking on. And so let's say we're back to our person here, say our second page, and they're like, oh, okay, well, actually it'd be interesting to this internet marketing, something I'm kind of interested in, so I'd like to go check out their ebook. And so they clicked on the CTA, and if we see down here, of course, we're tracking that CTA click that just happened. And the reason we're doing that is so we can understand click-through rate. So this person came to the website, they hit the first blog post, and they got an impression. Then they went to the next blog post, got another impression. Then they clicked on one of them. So we know that we've now got a click-through rate of 50% on this. We've hit this landing page, which is shown one view. Now this person might say, hey, I'm going to go ahead and download this ebook. Level10.com. And now they hit the thank you page for this website, and now our new events come in. And actually, kind of a whole series of events came in. The main one being that a form was submitted. We can set on this thank you page what kind of goal we want to trigger. So sort of this reddish color here means that a goal was triggered of what we call top of the funnel offer. It might be that they requested a demo, or subscribe to the email, whatever it is. But then we also had a landing page conversion, and we had a CTA conversion. So here we saw that there's been one view on this landing page, and it's converted once, so we've got 100%. And back to our CTA, the CTA was shown twice, clicked on once, and the form was submitted. So now we have 100% conversion on it. Of course, you're never going to get that on a real website, but works well in the demo. Okay, so that's and this will. So what I want to show you, I'll show you next is what this stuff. Like I said, this is kind of a real-time dashboard. Just kind of helps show like all the different things that are mapping through. Because you don't have on a real website. It's got lots of stuff coming through. It's too hard. It's a lot of times just difficult to see all the different things that are going on. But let's show what the real reports end up looking like in the system. And I've got a window where they're open somewhere. Here we go. Okay, so for this, I'm going to go ahead and move over to our main website, the Get Level 10 website, because it has real data running through it. And so this is the main scorecard for the website. Again, what we want to do is we want to bring in all these different components on the website. The other thing we really want to do is we find that a lot of people, they focus on just these volume metrics. How many hits am I getting? How many visitors and so forth? And we want to get people much more focused on the value of what's going on rather than just sort of these raw volume metrics. But so if we look here, we can see all the entries that are coming through. This is where all the values coming through, conversions. Wow, we got a lot of engagement on that day. Huh, that's interesting. Must have had a lot of people. Must have had a good blog post that people were commenting on and so forth. And then we can look at across our website what all's going on. So we've in the last 30 days we've had 92 top of the funnel conversions, 32 times our contact form's been submitted. Our content has been shared in social 121 times. The CTAs have been clicked on 119. We can look at what the top pages are on the website over the last 30 days. What's our top traffic sources? All these different things we can look at. But one of the things we want to do is we actually want to start. Then we can start to dig down deeper. And so I can go to something like a content report. Let me refresh this page. And so here we can see all the top content on our website. And one of the things we do, we have a lot of these different types of reports where we're showing entrances, page views, but then really value. And we're trying to break things down by, how much value is a piece of content delivering in a day, and entrances and so forth. Although one thing that's kind of, this is not necessarily the greatest list in the world because we're mixing things like our home page in with our contact page, and they're really very different types of pages. So really to do a better analysis, what we might want to do is say, I want to look at all my attraction pages, or I want to look at all my blog posts or something like that. And so now we can look at pages that are similar to get an idea on which ones are performing the best. And so, and this is a pretty good example. So we've got a blog post that we wrote a little while ago, and for some reason search engines really like this one. But we find is it gets a lot of traffic, but it doesn't actually produce a ton of value. Where, say, this next one actually produces a lot more value per hit, but it's getting a lot less hits. And we can go ahead and look into, well, why is this blog post getting, what all is going on that's creating that value? So this is just the blog post. And if I click on Analytics, I can now get to our scorecard just for this page. And so, we can see is that that this blog post, even though it's an older blog post, it's still been shared 7 times in the last month or so. The CTA has been clicked on a couple times. We've gotten 2 top of the funnel offers submitted. So there's and then we can see like where all the traffic's coming from. So it's not placing great in organic search, okay, but apparently there's a lot of people coming to it direct. There's some referrals, so yeah, so probably a few people commented on it. On some different blog. Yeah, so here's a blog post, someone commented on it. So we can start to understand these things, and we might want to look at something deeper like, okay, well, if we're getting traffic from social networks, which social networks? Is this particular page? That was a bad example. There's no traffic from social networks. So let's instead try search engines. Well, everything's from Google. So, all right, we're not getting anything from MSN or Yahoo on this one, but if we were, then you'd see those showing up in the list, so we can start to understand which which types of traffic sources are producing the most value. So it's not just what this page is producing, but which traffic sources are. So that's kind of gets us into a lot of the different kind of content areas. And one of the other things that some of the other things that are really interesting to do. I talked a little bit about. We have things like the authors report. This is where we're passing an attribute in, so we can understand sort of what authors are creating the most valuable content. And I will say, for organizations where you have multiple authors coming through, So Dennis, anyway, so we have a few guest posts on this, but so we can see like what authors are producing the most value. We can look at the number of posts they've produced on the site, and so forth. And maybe you can go and that way some of the other you can either reward people that are doing a good job, or you can the other authors might want to go find out what is it that's making this other author so popular. And we can do this with all kinds of different things, such as let's look at the most popular terms on this on the website. And so we write a lot about Drupal. So Drupal social media is really high, and so this will help you understand like what topics should we be writing about. So Twitter seems to produce a fair amount of value. This Twitter term, so we see that kind of per hit we're getting a lot more engagement. These again are going to be things people sharing or people submitting forms, something like that. So Twitter, for some reason, is producing a good amount of value. So that'd be kind of interesting to understand what's driving that. So that's sort of the helping us understand how to create better content and things along those lines. But the whole other side of intelligence is understanding things like visitors and what they're doing going through the website. For that, I'm going to go ahead and go back to our demo, just so I'm not showing real people on our live website. And so if I go back to our contacts, so if you remembered, I submitted a form, and so here is me that submitted this. Now I've done this demo several times, so what's happening here is that I've got a lot of web form submissions that I've done. One thing I'm going to do is I kind of talked about that this profile pulls data from a bunch of different sources, and you can set that up to happen when a form's submitted or various different things like that, but normally it happens on cron, so I just ran the cron on this. And refresh. So I just ran the cron on this, and now it's pulled, it's pulled the Google Analytics data in, and so forth, and I can look at things like our click stream. So actually kind of see how the person navigated through the website. And so they started from a referral, then they went, and this is just the little sequence we went through. So hitting our brand page, then going to our other blog post, did the click-through on the CTA form, and then downloaded the ebook. And so you got kind of this fun little JavaScript timeline thing, or you can look at it more in a text form. So it's walking through all the different events that are going on, of course giving us information like where the person's from, and so forth. And then if you've got systems like MailChimp or HubSpot or some things like that, we have ways of integrating this data in. And then one of the kind of last reports I'll kind of show is, I need to update this site, is the main dashboard. And so the main dashboard, I'll actually show it on our website. It'll look a little bit, it'll have real data in it. Intelligence, real time, okay. Whoop, nope, that's not what I want to do. I want to go to reports, intelligence, there we go. Okay, so this is kind of the main dashboard, and we really like to use this dashboard for inbound marketing style websites. Sometimes we'll switch them out if it's more of, like, say, a community website or something like that. But so we can set an objective of how much traffic we want to create, and so we can see on starting from the beginning of the month up to today how we're meeting that objective, and then down here it kind of breaks it down by what are our traffic sources. So the big green line is going to be organic traffic, which drives a lot of our data. And then here is these are all the new contacts that we've produced. We're not quite hitting our goals, so we need to look at doing that better. But it tells us what types of forms are being submitted and so forth. So our main contact form, requested demo, top of the funnel offer, and then the other thing we have is we have all of the content that's being produced on the website, kind of mapped out over a timeline. And so we can see, and then we can kind of hover over these to understand which of these, the bigger the dot, sort of the more effective they've been. In fact, we actually had a lot of social sharing on this day. Huh, that's interesting. So these are comments and social shares, engagement events. Probably what it's going to be is it's going to be this post here that generated a lot of that. So least popular, most beneficial social media sites in Google. Oh, okay. So must be an interesting topic. So that's kind of a what the intelligence system is. We feel that the way websites are going is they're not going to just be they're not going to just be this thing that manages content. They're going to be bringing in intelligence from all different parts of the web, and they're going to be helping people make better decisions. And so, that's what we're hoping to do, is to help, make Drupal sort of a leader in having this sort of integrated intelligence into a website. So at this point, I'll go ahead and open it up for questions. I will say that, let people know that there's a free version and there is a pro version or paid version of Intel. And the free version will work on any Drupal 7 website. You can get it by just going to project/Intel and install it if you have a Drupal 7 website, and go from there. But I'll go ahead and open it up for questions.
We have one question, and it says, if Intel is purchased, will I be giving support on how to read some of these reports?
That's a good question. So we actually have a service that we've developed called R&R, Reports and Recommendations, that is more for that, to kind of keep the prices down, What we call the base level service, it's kind of left on your own. We've got some blog posts about how to do this. The R&R report, though, because there's a lot of people that says, well, what I really need is someone to help me interpret what these, what this data means, and to really help over time. You want to start to craft different ways of looking at content, better segmentation, better scoring, things like that. And so there's a service that we have that couples the professional services where once a month we go in and we actually produce a document report, sort of in a PowerPoint presentation. And so there's kind of a lightweight that says, here's, it talks about like recommendations. I'm making kind of a quick analysis of what's going on the website, and then some recommendations how to do things better. And then once a quarter, we come in and do a deeper analysis that we might look to adjust some of these numbers. But as far as the normal subscription plan, we call the Pro subscription plan, that would be just reading blog posts and so forth. There's not support at that level where people could ask those kinds of questions. Although we will have a forum coming up here shortly that people can ask questions on the forum.
Okay. Ludwood asked, what is the difference between the two versions, the Pro and the free?
Okay. And we're going to be launching a website here in a week or two that will get into more specifics. But essentially, what the difference is that the free version brings in a lot of the reports that you saw, and it brings in all the reports are sort of around the website and around content. What the Pro version does is it adds all the visitor reports. So visitor tracking, the click streams, tracking conversion workflows, those kinds of things. And so, the idea is basically, talk about kind of two main things we're trying to do as marketers is attract and convert. And so the free version is mainly designed to help with the attract part. So what type of content is producing the most value? What type of traffic source is producing the most value? And then the convert part, and how do we convert better? That's sort of the Pro version. That's doing all the visitor tracking, doing it and like syncing all the data and all those things.
Here's another one. Is Intel a standalone product, and will it work on any Drupal 7 site?
The way it works is, so there's a module, and it's sort of like Mullum or a few other services out there that there's an API service to it to kind of store certain pieces of data. And actually, a lot of the data actually gets stored in Google Analytics or in other services, but there's certain things that can't be stored in Google Analytics, and so we store it in an API system. And so what ends up happening is you download the module, and you install the module. And if you ever installed Mullum, it's a lot like Mullum, where then you sign up for an API key. There's a free API key. There's a Pro API key. You put the key in, and it starts working. There also is some libraries that are just free to download and put into your website that kind of handle all the report generation. There's a good blog post on our website. Felipe, can you make sure to send out that blog post? There's a good blog post about just how to do the installation. Or actually, if you just go to project/Intel, there's a link to the blog post walking through the installation.
One last question, and is will Intel make it easier for me to perform an A/B testing with using all the analytics that it drives?
So it does play a role in A/B testing. A lot of times, what we use it depends on what level of testing people want to do. But a lot of times, we use Google Content Experiments, and actually, the Google Content Experiments is actually a pretty good module just as it is. The only real drawback to the way Google Content Experiments work, there's a few drawbacks, but one of the, of course, it is a great product for free. But one of the drawbacks is that you can only trigger the success of a page. So let's say you set up you can set up anywhere from 2 to 5 different variants of say, a landing page. And the only thing that you can use to say, was this page successful, is a goal. And so generally it's like a form got submitted or something along those lines. Well, intelligence allows you to use alternative things because a part of what it does is a JavaScript framework that pushes goals over to Google Analytics as events. And so you can set up any sort of event to trigger that goal rather than it just, say, being a form submission or something like that. And so that's kind of one of the main areas where it helps with A/B testing. There are some things that we're going to do that's actually kind of one of the highest things on the drawing board or the roadmap, is to do some more things around A/B testing. And of course, there's some other great products that people use. Website Optimizer is another great product. But so it does facilitate. It gives you the ability to be much more flexible in your goals with Google Content Experiments. But like I said, there's the Google Content Experiments module, and the way Google Content Experiments actually works pretty well. There's not necessarily that much room to enhance them.
That was the last question.
Okay. Great. All right, cool. Well, and actually, something that's pretty exciting is that so while we've been kind of building Open Enterprise, we've had kind of a private beta, and so the free version's been out there for a while, but we've had this private beta, and so there really hasn't been a way for people to generally buy the pro version of it. And we are working very quickly, and we'll be launching the system here shortly, so that people can get the pro version. And you can switch back and forth between the free and the pro. So it's not like if you install the free version now, it's just a matter of changing the key. Or actually, it's not even changing the key. We change we flip a switch, and it changes it in your website. So we're hoping by the end of next week that we will have that up and going, and we'll be sending out some more information about that when we get it up.
Tom, we have one last question that just came in, and okay. Eric asked, how does this work with Open Enterprise Pro?
Great question. Okay, so, wow, this could get to be a bit of a long. I'll try to. This is what happens when you're an engineer and you're really close to these products. Basically, what ends up happening is that Open Enterprise sort of out of the box can work on any Drupal 7 website to a certain level, but there's some site building you would do to get certain things working. So a good example of this is like the conversion workflow. And so like one of the things that and I'll kind of show kind of what this looks like a little bit. So under the conversion workflow, in fact, actually, this is Open Enterprise Pro, the distribution. So if I go in and I look at my thank you pages, so we hit that the Essential Guide to Internet Marketing, and I go to Edit. One of the things that that Intel's set up to do is that you can actually use this field to change what goal you want to be triggered when a form is submitted against this page. So you're not always having to run back to Google Analytics to try to set up all these goals. I can even say, hey, if someone downloads this particular ebook, I can override the default value, which I think is 15. I can say, oh, I want this ebook to be worth 20 or only like 5 or whatever. And so there's these forms that could be set up. Or let's say, for example, if I go to a blog post that triggers that. Let's say I go to a blog post. So here is a blog post. And I want to push some custom page attributes or an event or visitor attributes or something like that. I have these field sets that can go in here and do this. And so what we've done so if you put this on a default Drupal 7 installation, to get to some of the deeper, more advanced features in Intel, you're going to have to do some site building. You're going to go put in some field sets and add them to your content types and things along those lines, where in Open Enterprise, all that stuff's already built out. And so that's kind of the thing. It's sort of and one of the things that we have to do a decent amount is whenever sometimes we'll do marketing or we'll help people out with some consulting, getting some of the stuff installed on a website that isn't Open Enterprise. And so we're adding these fields, adding them to content types, and a lot of times we'll do it features. So a lot of times we might just port over the blog feature or something like that. But it's got all this stuff all kind of built in that facilitates all this extra data being pushed over. And then even things like the CTA, things like the social sharing on the blog, that'll automatically happen on any Drupal 7 website just by adding add this to it. But in Open Enterprise, it's already added, so you don't even have to kind of worry about it. So I guess probably the best way to say it is that if you're adding it to a Drupal 7 website, when you install it, it starts doing a lot of things. But to unlock a lot of the deeper features, you'll want to do some site building, and then Open Enterprise also sort of makes a kind of a good demo for intelligence, because we've set up categories and taxonomies and all that kind of stuff when the demo builds, so that everything's being kind of pushed properly. So anyway, yeah, like I said, we're working on getting a new website up for actually both for Intel and for Open Enterprise. And a lot of what we're doing is we're starting a partner program. So if any of you are agencies and you're looking for, what we found is that this actually really helped us land a lot of clients, and helps us also understand things to kind of go back and sell to a client or serve changes to the website and things along those lines. And so for you agencies out there, we're going to be launching our partner program and so forth. So be looking for the launch. And thanks for joining us.